Welcome back to part two now of Journey to Forgiveness Road. We're going to glean more today for a prophet's reward about forgiveness. And this is such a special journey. I hope that you had an opportunity to make your list of people and experiences and words and situations that have just caused you to feel unforgiveness or bitterness or resentment or anger or frustration or any of those things. I hope that you took time to really examine yourself, examine through your life. I mean, there's all kinds of things that even could be in you begrudgingly for years. And you want to write those things down, whether it be family, community, neighborhood, childhood friends, teachers, workplace people, and on are the variety of situations that could just have incidences of offense that would really imprison you in these negative emotions towards a person and feeling injustice. Injustice itself just makes us bitter. It makes us angry. It makes us, harbor all kinds of things and feel begrudgingly and think thoughts that, like, I just want to have, you hold a grudge because you feel like empowered by those negative emotions. And it's not power at all. It's imprisoning you in this dark thing that starts to limit you, makes you uncomfortable to be around, makes you start feeling sickness and disease. And there's all kinds of adverse conditions and effects and impacts of unforgiveness. So today, we're going to take the key by looking and examining these scripture passages of two biblical situations where there was offense and there was unforgiveness and bitterness and anger to the point of rage and wanting to kill. I mean, it was that extreme. These are very extreme offenses, but as we harbor it, it gets to that place, just like with Cain and Abel, it gets to that place where it starts getting into you in such a way that it just becomes this kingdom of darkness place. This becomes this prison. It becomes this dungeon of unforgiveness, and you just don't even know that you're in it. But you need to unlock it. You need to take the key of forgiveness and unlock your prison of unforgiveness so that you can actually come out into the beautiful light of life and start living again, and people will enjoy you again, and you'll enjoy life again. So, today we're going to finish up the two situations and scenarios and reports in the Bible of these two different offenses we looked at in part one, which was Jacob and Esau, and then we looked at Joseph and his 11 brothers. So let's continue on now. And I want you to listen and take hold of how grace just invaded these situations and how forgiveness came. And it just unlocked every bitter, resentful, dark thing. And it was like light just penetrated, and it just made everything that was ugly become lovely. Everything that was ashes became beautiful. The ashes of unforgiveness and the ugliness of unforgiveness became beautiful and lovely in the light of forgiveness. Let's start with Jacob and Esau. And if we remember what happened in part one, Jacob actually deceived his father Isaac and impostered his brother Esau and he set up a situation where he stole the family blessing inheritance from Esau and he took it for himself. So Esau was outraged when he found out shortly after, and he wanted to kill his brother. Now, when we start reading here, many, many, many years have passed. They both have grown up into grown men, and their Jacob has families now. He has children and he has flocks, and so does his brother, has all kinds of, you know, flocks and just a wonderful blessings are in both of their lives. So this is where we're going to begin to see how God has been over the years massaging all that bitterness and unforgiveness and massaging that situation of deceit. And look at what God has done with both of these brothers now. And remember, they were twins. They shared the womb together. So twins tend to be very, very close to each other. So let's look at how God worked out from all that prison of unforgiveness and bitterness and anger to coming out of the prison. And what was the key? Let's find out what the key was to get out of unforgiveness into beautiful forgiveness. Genesis 32, starting at verse 6, begins. Then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him, and the flocks and herds and camels, into two companies. And he said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, Return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become two companies. Okay, let's just pause there for a moment. What is Jacob saying in this prayer? Something has changed from deceiver Jacob to what? Now he's humble. He's realizing all that God has done for him over the years. He said, I only came to this place with my staff, this place where my mother sent me. I only came with a staff in my hand, and now I am returning two companies large, blessed. It has humbled him. His blessings and the care of the Lord has humbled him. So that's one of the keys, and that is actually the main key to forgiveness, humbling ourselves. Now, of course, Jacob is the one who committed the offense, and many times when forgiveness is involved, the person who offends us may not necessarily be apologizing and may not necessarily be repentant. But regardless, we need to get out of our prison of unforgiveness, regardless of what they think about the situation or how they regard the situation. We can't get out of the prison of unforgiveness until we forgive. And it's not contingent upon whether the person repents or not. It's totally up to us. It's our choice to unlock our prison of unforgiveness and enter into the freedom of forgiveness. Let's go on and see what else Jacob has to say. And remember, he was the one who committed the offense, but he is here repenting and being humbled. Verse 11, we're continuing. And it's Jacob talking, still praying to the Lord. And he says, "Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." For he lodged there. So he lodged there. Okay, so this is after his prayer. He lodged there that same night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau, his brother, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass over before me, and put some distance between successive droves." And he commanded the first one, saying, "When Esau my brother meets you, and asks you, saying, To whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, They are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us." So he commanded the second and the third, and all who followed the droves, saying, "In this matter you shall speak to Esau when you find him, and also say, Behold, your servant Jacob is behind us." For he said, "I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me." So the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp, and he rose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. Moving on to chapter 33 now. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants, and he put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, you gotta turn the page. You gotta turn the page at the best part. Oh, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed down. Afterward, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "These are to find favor in the sight of my lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." And Jacob said, "No, please. If I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." So he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, "Let us take our journey. Let us go, and I will go before you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure, until I come to my Lord in Seir." And Esau said, "Now let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Succoth. And let me just pause and say Succoth means booths. Continuing on with verse 18 of chapter 33, it says, "Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. And he bought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel. Isn't that such a beautiful story of forgiveness and reconciliation? It's just heartwarming to see how these brothers just came together and embraced each other and were so happy to be brought back together and reconciled. And no one made mention of any kind of offense or any kind of thing that was, they didn't even talk about anger or anything. They were just so glad to be back in each other's lives. And that is what the grace of God can do. The grace of God can just come in like this warm, glorious light. And look how free they were. Look how their lives were so free after that, and how they could just embrace each other and offer each other gifts and just say, that was their way of saying, I love you, you're my brother, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for you. These were the two guys that were gonna, that were at each other's throats and betraying each other and deceiving and stealing, and oh my gosh, that's like night and day. But that is a miracle and wonder of God in our situations. And when God unlocks that prison of unforgiveness, he gives us the key of forgiveness to say, I forgive. It's just a whole new life that opens up. Let's look at the next situation, which was Joseph and his 11 brothers. And I'm going to read several passages to really give you more of bringing you current in the backdrop of Joseph's life at this point, because where did we leave off last time? Last time he was sold as a slave into Egypt, and he was Potiphar's slave. Potiphar was an officer of Pharaoh, the highest person over ruling over Egypt. And here is Jacob, a slave in the house of Potiphar, who was directly connected with Pharaoh. So we want to then look at how God had massaged the years of Joseph's life and favored Joseph and continued to bless him even as property of Pharaoh and Egypt and Potiphar. God had really blessed Joseph and favored Joseph with all of the people. So even though he was angry with his brothers, God had a hand in the situation, and we will learn why. We will learn why God's hand was in the situation and favored on Joseph, even though he was angry. And we will learn why, again, that Jacob's name was changed to Israel. So now in this passage, Jacob is not really called Jacob all the time. Sometimes he's referred to as Israel because of what we read in the last passage about Jacob wrestling with the angel, and the angel ordained him his name to be Israel. So when I talk about Israel, it's Jacob. And you can see the generational effects of unforgiveness and forgiveness. Okay, so let's begin this. And I have a few passages to read, different passages. But I'm going to start with Genesis 42, which is 10 chapters later, and I'm going to start at verse 6. Now Joseph was governor over the land, meaning Egypt. He was governor over all Egypt. God had worked in Joseph's life to bring him to that point. And it was he who sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Okay, so here comes some of that bitterness and resentment. It's manifesting out of Joseph. And it's also really what he dreamed about, that they were bowing down to him. And here it is in life happening. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them, and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." But he said to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and no one, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. In this manner, you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested, to see whether there is any truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph said to them the third day, "Do this and live, for I fear God." Now, let's pause there. What does that mean, for I fear God? I believe that in this passage, we can see, even in those 3 days, that the Lord was working in Joseph's heart, that he acknowledged that he fears God. So what he was doing was he was considering all of this situation, how he was treating them, how they treated him. He was reflecting in his heart. He was dealing with his emotions, for he fears God. Let's go on. Verse 19 of chapter 42, it says, "If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be continued to your prison house. But you go and carry grain for the famine to your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother. For we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, Did I not speak to you, saying, Do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. Let's go on further in this account and find out. Let's go to chapter 43 and start at verse 11. And here the brothers were now at home. They had returned to go get the youngest brother and to bring the food to their father. Okay? And here the father is talking. And their father Israel said to them, If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best fruits of the land in your vessels and carry down a present for the man, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take your brother also, and arise, go back to the man, and may God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So the men took the present and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hand, and arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, Take these men to my home, and slaughter an animal and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon. Then the man did as Joseph ordered, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, It is because of the money which was returned in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may make a case against us and seize us to take us as slaves with our donkeys. When they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door to the house and said, Oh, sir, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, but it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it back in our hand, and we have brought down other money in our hands to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks. But he said, Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that he would eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? And they answered, Your servant our father is in good health. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Now his heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and wept there. Now, let's pause, for you see how in this time of engaging his brothers, God had softened his heart, had softened the bitterness and unforgiveness and resentment, because he was so glad to be in the presence of his brothers again, even though they didn't recognize him. So something has was changing, and this person is the offended one whose heart was changing. In the other situation with Jacob, Jacob, who committed the offense, his heart was changing. But here we see how Joseph, who was very embittered, was was changing, and his heart was softening toward his brothers. But we also see that his brothers were repenting and reflecting on what they did, and they knew that what we did was wrong, and they were confessing to one another. See how God was working in the situation to change their hearts, to bring them into the beautiful loveliness and light and freedom of forgiveness. Let's continue. Okay, so we were reading about Joseph and he was weeping in his room. Verse 31 of chapter 43 says, "Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, 'Serve the bread.' So they set him a place by himself, and they by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. So they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at each other. Then he took servings to them from before him. But Benjamin's servings was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him." Let's go on to chapter 45, starting at verse 1. "Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, 'Make everyone go out from me.' So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it." Let's pause there and just think about the years of emotion that were being poured out of Joseph and being healed. He had not seen his family since his teenage years. He never thought he would see them again. But when they were there bowing before him and God brought memory of his dreams back to him, then he knew that this was not about him or his brothers. He knew that this was from God. Let's continue. Verse 3 of chapter 45, Genesis. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? And his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, Please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now, do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord over all his house, and a ruler throughout the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father now, and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children, your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. And behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. So you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and of all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that his brothers talked with him. Now the report of it was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, Say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart. Go to the land of Canaan, bring your father and your households, and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat in it the fat of the land. Now you are commanded, do this. Take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives. Bring your father and come. Also, do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Then the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man changes of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. And he sent to his brother these things: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed. And he said to them, See that you do not become troubled along the way. Now comes the greatest part of this road of forgiveness. Genesis 50. beginning at verse 14 through 22. And after he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all who went up with them to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face. And they said, 'Behold, we are your servants.' Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring it about, as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now therefore do not be afraid, I will provide for you and your little ones.' And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. That completes this account of Forgiveness Road for Joseph. Joseph had a lot to forgive. He carried a lot of reason, rightfully so, for all the injustice that was done to him. But he knew that God really had a hand on his life, and he knew that this ugly situation with his brothers actually God used to position him ahead in advance to preserve their very lives. His forgiveness of his brothers saved a whole nation, a nation we know today as Israel. And forgiveness in your life, what can your forgiveness do to save people and situations? If you look at your list and you begin to forgive all of those people and all of those situations and all of the words of offense and all of the actions of offense, what might God do with your forgiveness? Perhaps God might save a family, save a community, save an entire nation. Perhaps God might even save the globe by your forgiveness. Today, step onto Forgiveness Road and begin before God saying, "I forgive person A for what they did to me. I forgive person B for what they did to me." And get all the way down to person Z and then ask, "Now, Lord, bless this forgiveness and bless those who offended me, that out of this you shall be glorified." And then behold the glory of the Lord and the grace and favor upon your life. I pray that this has been a very special journey for you, even though it has been very extended. It has been the sweetest of all journeys for me to a prophet's reward. And until next time, Stay on the righteous path. Bye bye.